Some stages of learning to read and write take longer, require more practice, and demand better instruction than others. For example, learning whether the text in your language goes from left to right or right to left is fairly easy, and once learned, it's seldom forgotten. Learning to convert the symbols on the page to speech is another matter. Language is a reflection of the workings of the mind, and is therefore necessarily complex even at the oral level. Adding writing to the picture puts an additional code-making, code-breaking component into an already complex structure. Human writing systems have only been around for 3,000 years or so, and though they convey oral language, they did not develop in the same way as oral language. It's a good idea to remember this when thinking about how children are taught to read. Here are some basic principles that can help. Reading and writing is not the same as listening and speaking. Therefore, we get better results when we remove the expectation that children will just start reading in the same way as they just started speaking. Learning to read is not the same as skilled reading. Therefore, we get better results when we are aware of the process of learning to read and when we teach towards that. Skilled reading is a destination. The journey is somewhat different. To begin with, any theory of reading instruction must have a perspective on what reading actually is. Reading experts often refer to the simple view of reading. This is a formula designed to help educators assess and assist readers. Just because it is called the simple view doesn't mean that reading is simple. The simple view states that skill level in reading comprehension can be predicted by measuring two processes. And there are two critical activities in learning to read. The first is word level reading. The second is language comprehension. So the better you can convert the letters on the page into sounds and words, and the more words you understand, the more you'll be able to comprehend what you're reading. The simple view of reading is a logical, testable formula grounded in decades of research. If you really want to know how well someone is doing at reading, you have to test both word-level reading and language comprehension and multiply those scores together. They should be assessed separately from one another to come to an overall reading score. Let's do the maths. Taking the simple view diagram that we saw on the last page, where would you place the following students? There are two measures: word recognition and language comprehension. Word recognition means converting the letters on the page into sounds and words, and language comprehension is words that you understand. In this measure, let's say the perfect score is 100, 10 for word recognition and 10 for language comprehension. Student 1 gets a score of 100. For word recognition, they get 10, and for language comprehension, they get 10. That's the ideal. Student 2 gets 5 on word recognition and 5 on language comprehension, giving an overall reading comprehension score of 25. Student 3 gets 10 for word recognition and 5 for language comprehension, giving an overall score of 50. And student 4 also gets 50, but this time word recognition is 5 and language comprehension is 10. What are the implications for intervention for all of these students? Student 1 got the perfect score of 100. We place them in the upper right quadrant of the simple view of reading. They'll be able to access the curriculum throughout their academic career. Student 2 got 5 and 5 on both measures with an overall score of 25. Student 2 is in the bottom left quadrant. This student has poor word recognition and poor language comprehension. This means that they're most in need because the language of teaching is also a problem. So when you're giving them instructions during intervention, they're also going to find it hard to follow those instructions. Student 3 has good word recognition, but their language comprehension is low. They're in the bottom right quadrant. Implications for intervention for those children would be something along the lines of comprehension strategies, perhaps speech pathology for expressive and receptive language, lots of vocabulary work, and work on morphology. Student 4 also got 50, but they're in a different part of the simple view of reading. They've got good language comprehension processes, but their word recognition is low. A score like that could indicate dyslexia. Of course, student 2 may also be dyslexic. Children with scores like this often get graded as at standard or at level when they're given assessments that mix word reading and language comprehension, such as running records. A student like student 4, who's got good language comprehension, will be able to guess their way through assessments that mix the two and don't separate them out. This is not a good situation. It makes it so that they don't get the intervention that they need in decoding. They may eventually figure out the code, but their ability to spell will be affected by not picking them up and addressing their issues. To unpack the processes further, Hollis Scarborough invented something called the reading rope. Language comprehension is made up of increasingly strategic use of background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. People also become increasingly automatic in word recognition, which relies on phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition.